This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Sharif Abdul Quddus with Anjali Kamat. We're talking about Plan Mexico. We want to turn now to John Gibler. He joins us on the line from Mexico. He's an independent journalist and Global Exchange Human Rights Fellow based in Mexico. His forthcoming book is Mexico Unconquered, Chronicles of Power and Revolt. John Gibler, your most recent article is titled Mexico's Ghost Towns, the Other Side of the Immigration Debate. Can you talk about it, please?
Good morning. Yes, thank you. I think it's essential to understand the link between the so-called free trade regime embodied in NAFTA and migration. NAFTA's economic restructuring of Mexico's economy has forced millions of small farmers from the countryside, and in so doing shattered local food production and shattered local economies, thus forcing people to move across the border looking for work. Analysts that I interviewed at the University of Zacatecas said to me, Mexico, under this new economic regime, is exporting the factory of migrants. Also, they said Mexico is mortgaging its future with remittances, the money that migrants send back. And what they argue is taking place is that the United States, through NAFTA, is holding Mexico at bay as a kind of reserve army of workers for its own industrial restructuring. Thus, all the benefits and the luxuries absent in Mexico's own countryside are being built and constructed and elaborated inside the United States by migrant labor, largely Mexican.
Laura Carlsen, I wanted to ask you a question. Can you talk about the impact of Plan Mexico on social movements in Mexico?
Yes, well, already with the Mexican army in the streets, which is something that began as soon as Felipe Calderón became president and will be reinforced through Plan Mexico, what we're seeing is attacks basically on social movements. Within Chiapas, this has been particularly seen in the Zapatista autonomous communities, where the army has gone in often with the pretense of looking for drug production, which they've not found, but they've used it to harass those communities in which major battles over natural resources and their right to autonomy have been taking place. So indigenous peoples are one group that is at risk. Another, and this is cases that we've seen in the northern state of Chihuahua, has to do with opposition leaders in general. When Operation Chihuahua started, which is one of the major operations of the drug war, the army came in and they immediately rounded up several social leaders that had warrants out for their arrest since 2003 for blocking an international bridge in a protest over NAFTA. They were just routinely rounded up as part of these drug war operations. This is another group that we're going to be looking very carefully at because we believe that this will be happening in a widespread way throughout the country as the drug war is expanded. Other groups that are at risk include women, where the military has been responsible for a number of rapes and sexual abuse against women in different parts of the country, and also the opposition leaders and indigenous people and migrants that were mentioned before, who have become a criminal group under this particular model of a drug war and a fight against organized crime.
Well, Laura Carlsen, I want to thank you very much for being with us. Laura Carlsen is director of the Mexico City-based America's Policy Program of the Center for International Policy. Her report, A Primer on Plan Mexico, we'll link to that on our website at democracynow.org. And John Gibler joining us on the line from Mexico. He's an independent journalist and Global Exchange Human Rights Fellow based in Mexico. His forthcoming book is Mexico Unconquered, Chronicles of Power and Revolt. Avi Lewis, I want you to stay with us. Avi Lewis is the host of Inside USA, airing weekly on Al Jazeera English. You won't find it almost anywhere in the United States. Despite a well-publicized launch nearly 2 years ago, Al Jazeera English is only available in 3 U.S. markets: Burlington, Vermont, Toledo, Ohio, and Washington, D.C. Avi Lewis, there was a startling story in the New York Daily News on Monday about a producer of Al Jazeera English trying to book an interview with an Iraq War veteran who was running for a seat in Congress, retired Army Lieutenant Colonel Alan West. Can you talk about what happened?
Well, Keith Olbermann called him out as the worst person in the world the other night, and it's kind of a funny story, and at the same time is shocking. I think there's a thread of in this show today of things that people do in election years, what they can get away with, and what's really going on under the surface. Lieutenant Colonel Alan West is running as a Republican in Florida in a congressional district around Boca Raton. He's a 22-year Army veteran, and he served in both Iraq and Afghanistan. And one of our guest bookers was trying to reach him to get his, to get him on air during the news hour, to interview him about rise in casualties and how the war in Afghanistan is going. And when, she was pre-interviewing him, and, you pre-interview a number of guests to try to find the right person for the show. And in a courtesy move, which is standard in television, she offered to send a car to pick him up and take him to the satellite studio where he'd do his interview. And when he heard this, he decided to call the FBI and claim that Al Jazeera was trying to kidnap him, which is hilarious on one level, and on another level, and he's making the most of it in his congressional race where he's an underdog and he's trying to beat up on Al Jazeera. I will never participate in a television network which is an enemy of our troops, etc. So it's sort of standard election year hyperbole and cartoonish politics. But working at Al Jazeera this year has been a crash course for me in the casual and persistent anti-Arab racism that my colleagues, especially the Arab American colleagues at Al Jazeera, have been facing for years. Al Jazeera English is a separate network launched 2 years ago. It's a global news network. We have an audience of 120 million worldwide. It's a very serious, sometimes a little too serious news network doing journalism in English around the world with, access to 60 bureaus worldwide. Al Jazeera Arabic is a network that revolutionized information in the Arab-speaking world starting in the early 1990s, doing independent journalism throughout Arab-speaking countries and being thrown out basically of almost every country where Al Jazeera Arabic has done independent journalism as a key project of advancing democracy and having independent information in a part of the world where there isn't enough of it. So Al Jazeera Arabic has really got it from both sides. But in an election year in the United States, to have incidents like this is quite shocking. And when we're trying to book guests for Al Jazeera English, that to be treated as a quasi-terrorist organization, which is shocking as a serious news organization, goes completely across the political spectrum. In fact, the State Department and the Pentagon are on Al Jazeera English almost daily because they watch us and know what we do and take us very seriously because of our global audience.
Avi, we have just under a minute left, but I wanted to ask you briefly about what happened in Burlington, Vermont with Al Jazeera being on TV there.
Well, I mean, Al Jazeera is in a very few markets, and you get these local backlashes based on fear and xenophobia. But in Burlington, Vermont, and wherever we've been able to develop an actual local viewership, there's tremendous response. So when the city council tried to yank Al Jazeera from the local cable system, there was a tremendous community response, and Al Jazeera is still on the air. And I think, when people get a chance to watch the channel, they see that it's a serious news channel, but that doesn't stop us from being smeared, as Arabs and Muslims are incessantly smeared in the United States. And I think in an election year, Democrats and the Obama campaign and others have to stand up and really denounce it, rather than really validating the smears by denying any connection to Islam as if it was a smear. I think that's a political a mistake, and it's sad to see.
Well, we're going to have to leave it there. Avi Lewis, I want to thank you very much for being with us. Avi Lewis is the host of Inside USA, a weekly program airing on Al Jazeera English. And that does it for today's program. If you'd like to get a copy of the show, you can visit our website at democracynow.org. I'm Sharif Abdul Quddus with Anjali Kamat. We'll be joining you again tomorrow. See you then.